All right. Hello. My name is Ted Veroni. I'm Chief Commercial Officer for Model AI. At Model AI, we built a AI engine for game development. Specifically, we built Model Test, which is end-to-end QA solution, helping game developers find more bugs and performance issues, all with an AI-driven solution that includes automated gameplay and advanced AI-driven detection. Enough about us here. Today, what we want to do is have a conversation more about the state of game QA and series of conversations we're having. And so excited to have this conversation now and reconnect with you, Alex Stokes, Director of QA for People Can Fly. But maybe first, before we get into some of these questions, Alex, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself a little bit, just short little background of you and what you're doing at People Can Fly.
Sure. Thanks, Ted. Well, yeah, I'm Alex. I've been in QA since about 2014 now, so I'm coming on my 11th year. I'm working for People Can Fly right now as our global QA director. And my role here is basically to make sure that all of our projects are using QA as effectively as possible. So making sure that all of our processes are aligned, and if we come up with a great innovative solution on one side, we can bring it to the other, and that the teams are happy, efficient, and doing their best work.
Great. So, I mean, given that you've had like, over 15 years of experience in the industry, working in the area of QA, curious about, what are some of the most critical changes that you've seen, in QA over the, 15 years of experience?
I think one of the biggest changes, which is, I mean, maybe obvious to anyone that's been in the industry a long time, is that we've started moving projects away from the waterfall approach in a very big, meaningful way. So it used to be a long time ago that we would start, there would be no QA, and then by the time we hit alpha or beta, we'd have 100, 200, and we just literally like a wave against rock, try to smash through the build and fix it. But these days, especially in my most recent work with Epic at People Can Fly, we've moved to a much more dev QA automation approach where we're in earlier, we understand systems deeper, and we solve bigger issues before they actually become an issue. And that's been one of the key changes that has just been really great for me to see, but also be a part of as we move forward. Definitely.
Yeah. So given the changes just outlined, how does this impact how you actually manage your teams today?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot has changed with people getting more technical, and especially at the speed that everything has been changing in QA. I think probably everyone in the industry has felt this, that change is coming in a lot faster. I've had to kind of pivot to teaching the whole team to fish instead of giving them fish, if that makes any sense, which is in the sense that I've been trying to model our department and my hiring practices looking for people who are looking for the next big thing instead of just people that can do what I need right now. And so actually one of the biggest changes for me in hiring and making the team has been that I need to look for people who are trying to find new solutions and innovative ideas for problems in front of them today. And then my job is to figure out how I can make those solutions fit for everyone all the time instead of one person at one time. Um, and that that change is very different from 2 years ago and even different from how a lot of people in QA start, which is very contracting focused, where you're told to just do the thing and not actually expand out. But it's been a super healthy change that I've been happy to see. And it's allowed us to grow more sustainably where we're not churning up 100 people and down 100 people on a project, but maybe 10 to 16, which has created a much stabler job environment for everyone too.
Good. I like that, teaching them to fish rather. Yeah. But what, and maybe kind of expanding on that idea and, given kind of your experience you already shared, right? Working from companies like Epic to your current role as head of QA for People Can Fly. What does the ideal collaboration model between QA production and engineering look like, at scale, right? So you talked a little bit about how you manage your team and how you kind of like that. I'm curious on how you are working across organizations these days.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's something I've been thinking about a lot actually, because until my time at People Can Fly, I was still very focused on projects in the second half of their life cycle. So either coming towards launch or post-launch even. But having worked on some earlier projects now, I've really noticed that a lot of studios for me have QA has either a good relationship with production or with engineering, but not usually both, which has been an interesting sort of problem to solve. But I've really come to realize that it's necessary to have both. One of the things we talk about a lot is how to assess a bug that should it be live or should it not be live? Should we fix it? Should we not fix it? And I've really tried to distill it down to this idea that our engineering team identifies risk what is the risk in implementing a fix? What could be the outcome? But QA really has to be the determiner of impact, right? How much does this impact the player? How important is this? And then production needs this information if they're going to organize a plan. And so, at a really fundamental level, what I've been trying to do is force sounds like a really strong word, but really force our leadership at the engineering, QA, and production level to work together more often around more things. And then more than that, because a lot of studios have meetings where everybody comes together, that's not like an innovative thing, finding out how we can make it a two-way conversation in those meetings. Because not many people actually leave room for QA to talk about what's important to them or give them the credentials that they rightly deserve when they're commenting on things that are adjacent to their discipline. So game design, the risk around fixing things in a certain way, level design, they often have, even if it's maybe a not educated is the wrong word, but even if it's not a professional opinion from someone that's trained in this, it often has a lot of truth to it that needs to be heard. And so finding a way to get all three of these groups talking together in a two-way conversation is super important.
Cool. Okay. Building a little bit on the idea of the collaboration frameworks, which love what you're saying too, and kind of consistent even what I heard from some other folks. But you also mentioned earlier about how you don't want to just like hire people at the end. How should studios rethink QA's involvement in the early development stages? To in order to
Yeah,
maximize strategic value.
yeah, I think that um, the need for technical QA and a better approach to QA early on is really important. One of the examples that I can give is we don't have a single project where we don't have a QA person in editor very early looking at things. In some cases, we're even training them on how to use our editor tools and what all of our all the plugins and things like that do. And even for us, we have QA dedicated to engine support and understanding what that looks like in order to make sure that even if we're prototyping something, we're thinking about it in a meaningful way and we're not just spitting it out and then submitting a prototype that we actually can't completely rebuild in a good way later, right? And so I think that as a studio, but also in my career, we've seen that we're moving towards less people earlier and more technical people earlier, which has helped a lot, whether that's, QA engineering directly someone who can program automation, or even dev QA who understands how to get into the guts of a game and talk about it in a meaningful way. And more importantly, honestly, and this is like a starting point I think a lot of studios would benefit from, is getting your QA in the room and having a QA person willing to learn will actually just be extremely effective 3 months down the road when they understand all of your systems deeply. It's such like a hidden value that people don't realize. I think
So
that
yeah, so
that's
now,
helped us not have to scale later.
oh yeah, so yeah, now really QA is now part of the strategic part of the development. So too, so it makes sense. It's not about getting a whole bunch of bugs, at the very end, fixing, like you said, scale up team. So it makes a lot of sense.
That's
You
right.
touched on like editor tools and expanding on that. Let's talk, are there any specific platforms, frameworks, or many custom built solutions now, tools that you're using that you found especially valuable for scaling QA operations?
Yeah, I think so. Weirdly enough, the thing that I found the most scaling and the best use of is any tool that can expedite reporting. And so for me, on that perspective, there's in a couple companies I've worked at now, we've had some form of automated crash reporting, which just spits this out in a way that an engineer can take it and run with it and never have to do anything. They're completely self-serving. But on the other side of it too is finding ways that we can get the entire team to report bugs helps QA focus in on more qualitative feedback and more complex problems than reporting the clipping issue or something like that. So a great tooling example is like having a button that pushes a screenshot, gives coordinates, and gives you one line to put in what the bug you're seeing is. And anyone can do that. The bug process has been demystified for your artists and your engineers and your producers, and anyone can just hit a button, write a sentence, and you're starting to operate at scale in a better way.
Cool. Okay. So earlier you mentioned about you like to teach people to fish, too. And so let's talk a little about team building, right? So building a resilient QA team requires both the technical skills, which is you talked also about getting involved earlier in the process, so it makes sense too. But it's also about adaptability, right? Too. So how do you assess and foster adaptability in QA professionals, especially as tools and workflows are evolving rapidly?
That's a good question. I think in Montreal, I'm lucky because we're kind of like a QA mecca where, for the most part, a lot of people in QA have all their fundamentals. So of course, asking and testing your fundamentals when you're hiring is really important. But for me, I've actually spent more time now and dedicate an entire interview towards this process of testing someone's critical thinking skills. And not even talking about testing, but talking about critical thinking and self-reflection, asking questions like, what is it that makes you happy in a job today? What is it the thing that you think you bring that nobody else does? What are getting people to ask questions and seeing how they turn that answer back to me? Because like I said before, one of my challenges has been finding QA people who want to be good in 5 years, not who want to be good now. I think one of the things about the gaming industry, but the tech industry as a whole, is the the level of technical influence grows every year. And so you need to be better at your job next year than you are this year. And so you might be improving at your job, but if you're improving at your job slower than the rate that the industry is moving, you're getting worse at your job relatively, even if you're getting better objectively. And so for me, hiring with the idea that I'm going to find people who will accelerate past that has been way more important to me than worrying about, are they a little bit more technical or do they have this little skill that I could teach in a month? And finding people to do that and a core group of people that can do that has been super important for me.
So yeah, you mentioned how the industry is evolving, quickly. And as I mentioned earlier, model where we are an AI company for game development too. So got to ask your opinion on how AI is impacting QA. And just to set some context, for this question, is we did pretty cool, pretty exhaustive. We call it the State of Games QA. It was a survey. We surveyed 300 professionals in the game developers, ranging from QA, development, design. We have a bunch of people in the industry, but all working at game studios too. So, and then in our survey, we had a bunch of questions, and one question is just sort of stuck out to me. It's like, fully 94% of developers believe AI will play an important role in the future of game QA. And honestly, even though I'm in AI for games, that kind of blew me away that it was that high, for that too. But related to that, but then also, another question or follow on was that just 18% believed that their studio was well prepared to implement AI in the processes. So I guess what I have for you, Alex, is maybe it's a two-part question. So first, which AI tools have you seen actually improve efficiency or coverage in your work?
So again, this is a tough one because I'm
If
I'm
any,
actually kind of
if,
the tough
if
audience
any
on
tool,
this, where I'm one of
you could be in the 18%,
yeah.
sorry?
Yeah, well, exactly, right? It's like I haven't seen a studio yet who I would say I'm very confident is prepared for AI testing, but I don't think that that's necessarily like a bad thing or a knock on any of the studios I've worked at, because one of the things that I see AI very similar to the way that I see telemetry, which is I think if we talked about telemetry 10 years ago, 15 years ago, no one would really know what to do with it. So, figuring out like all of your player stats and all of the live data that comes through and what does it mean and how to interpret it? Can you balance a game based on it? We're kind of in that phase with AI, which is that even if a studio is prepared, they don't necessarily know what to do with it. And I think that that's the hardest part about it, which is when you assess a solution, you're looking at the cost, you're looking at what it might be able to do for you now, but you're not really thinking about like what will it enable me to do afterwards. And so one of the things that I look at when I'm trying to talk about AI specifically is how can I prepare my team so that they don't have to do this work anymore and they know how to verify that the work is being done correctly by the AI. And those are the two things that I think a studio needs to think about as they're onboarding a solution, because if nobody knows how to interpret the data or nobody knows what they might do with that data when they get it back, then it feels like wasted money, even if actually it could be an exponential gain. And so that's one of the things that I'm trying to look at right now anytime I look at a solution, which is how can it empower me once I have the data instead of how does it get the data?
I liked your comment about telemetry because it's true. Like today, it's like table stakes and everyone understands what we're talking about, but it is sort of like that, with AI. So sticking on the AI question too. So, we talk about tools and, appreciate what you're saying. It's like, show me the solution, show me how it works. But like, where is like maybe the hype outpacing the real value? Because let's face it, you probably can't really swing a stick without hitting another AI company, in games. But, I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that hype
Yeah,
outpacing real
totally.
value.
I think the how do I say this? The idea that AI can just replace a tester is where the hype is really overblown right now, because I think AI can do specific things. It can test a golden path. It can test in a destructive way right now. Like that's pretty easy and rote. We can build that. But to really replace a tester who's taking in a lot of complex stimuli potentially, and trying to look and think and pivot in an intelligent way is really hard to do. It's one of the things that I actually talked to my team about from I did a year in software QA as well. I tried to help manage a tool there at TapClicks versus game QA, which is in software. You can come with this fundamental idea that a customer will try to use your tool correctly because your tool does a thing that they want. And so they will troubleshoot and try to get to their golden path, even if they deviate. A gamer will not. A gamer will do everything they can to avoid your golden path because they want to go build a house in the corner and they don't care about your story quest. The amount of people that I've heard play Skyrim and just never finish the main story, for example, is immense. More probably than not, never do that. And so when you approach it in QA, there are some fundamentals you can do, like checking for holes in the map and checking to make sure that your collision works everywhere and that all the jump heights are correct and things like that. But when it comes to understanding when a player looks at a scene and decides what to do, that's something that you still need a QA person to look at and say, no, no, I would probably go in one of these two directions, and this is why. And
Yeah.
so I think AI has a ton of potential in a lot of areas, but that's the one thing that everyone seems to be fixated, and a lot of people seem to be fixated on, but is not ready or easy yet.
No, that's right, and 100% agree. And it's like I always say I have these conversations a lot, with game studios, and it's, we say it's not about getting rid of all the humans, right? Too, it's about
Exactly.
letting humans focus on the more high value tasks with strategic value. A lot of things you talked about, right, involving earlier. So, but there's a lot of mundane and tedious aspects associated with QA smoke tests. Does a human need to go
Exactly.
through every single level of regression, of test two? That is where a bot, that we find can be very helpful, or identifying some, or even as we say, let the bots work for the humans, too. So
Yes,
it's like, so
exactly.
instead of running the bots work for the humans in the report. But anyway, we don't need to get into much in our solution. What I wanted to do is, we talked a little about collaboration, across the organization, that was good. But, maybe in the tips, and we offer a lot of tips too, it's like drilling down a little bit, and you've done, obviously you've managed test teams where you're working everything from compliance testing to certification, and big games, right? Large scale multiplayer environments too. So for studios looking to tighten their certification processes, what common pitfalls should they watch for? Anything you can help them to kind of avoid these,
Yeah, luckily, and maybe this is going to make me sound a little bit older, but certification's gotten a lot easier over the last 10 years. It's just gotten
Thank you.
immensely easier as we've moved to a digital age where platform holders are trying to bring you onto their service instead of hold you back from their brand. The average consumer has a distinction now between a PlayStation game and the PlayStation platform and brand. So certification came about because of that, which is the idea that if it's on my Nintendo, then probably people will think Nintendo is terrible if the game is terrible. That's kind of where certification came from. But to actually answer your question and be more direct is the best thing that I ever did when I was working at Keywords was I would have a QA tester, compliance tester, or certification tester sit down and boot the game on their platform of specialization. So it could be a PlayStation, it could be an Xbox, and just do a 20-minute recording of talking about all of the things to watch out for in the front end. And as they're matchmaking, talking about all the restrictions of the network and how that should function. And I think things like the average person doesn't realize, but it's normalized for them, which is like you can't on a PlayStation have a quit game button. You have to use their branded PS button to go to the menu to close the application. That's a requirement, right? And there's a bunch of those. So one of the best things I ever did was get a team together when they're still making a prototype in an alpha and just having them watch a half hour of a compliance QA tester test a finished game and say, this is all the things to look out for. This is what I'm paying attention to and help educate what Sony or Microsoft or Nintendo will look for when you're actually in the hot seat. Because once you get to your certification pipeline the last 6 months, it may be too late to change how your backend works and how your network works. And then you're praying that they just waive it and allow you to go anyway.
All right, that's a good tip. Okay, so look, we're coming up to the end of our discussion. I think we probably could talk about this stuff a long time, so we're going to have to save it for the next time I'm able to see you again in Montreal. But coming, one last question is, and I'd like to end these kind of conversations with some advice. And so for studio leaders out there now who are building, maybe the first, group, or maybe restructuring a QA, department today, what would be three guiding principles that you would recommend they adopt from day one?
Yeah. If I work from the assumption that you're hiring a QA professional that knows QA, because I'll put that aside, right? Like somebody actually needs to know how to do QA. For
Yeah,
me,
you're
one
a
of the
good sized
biggest things that
studio.
I've been, yeah. The one thing that I would really say is that QA comes from this waterfall idea. Calling it QA comes from this waterfall idea that the product is finished and then you need to get it to quality and you have to kind of burn down and run down. But what I've really tried to focus the team on, because we're talking now about live services, we're talking about QA being earlier and being part of the process longer, is QA is actually here to risk assess. Our job is to determine is something low, medium, or high risk, because nothing is no risk. If the goal is no risk, QA will always fail. And to try to move the team away from pass fail and more low risk, medium risk, high risk. So that would be one of the first things I say, because you really want to make sure that you stop your team from going to a combative mindset, which is that QA is the gate that blocks the development team from shipping a game. And instead, what level of risk are we willing to take? And that might be because of money, it might be because of quality, it might be because of publisher requirements, but understanding that every submission is a risk and you need to figure that out. Another thing that I would definitely consider is how and where is your QA team being heard? I think that this is really important. QA, everyone invites QA to meetings. QA often does not have a space or room to talk about what's going on with the build, or they don't know how to. And this is, we could do an entire talk on this, so I won't get into it too much.
Yeah.
But
I'm feeling it part two. Yeah.
exactly, right? But many QA people come out of outsourcing, and in outsourcing, you're taught that you should not be speaking up about things that are not your domain. And then when you come into a proper studio, it's the opposite. I need you to be speaking up every day. I need you to be challenging people every day. And so really trying to find a way to build QA back up into that collaborative role is super, super important. And I think that that context is something a lot of people who have never done QA don't understand.
That's interesting. I like that sort of mindset between your externally apparently versus internal. But yeah, and a third, you have a third, but
Yeah, that's right. I think the
I was
third one
counting. I had
too.
my fingers out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The third one for me, I think too, is making sure that you scale slow. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but sorry if you can hear my dog, but I know that sounds counterintuitive, but for me, hiring two people, seeing what the workload is, and again, doing that risk assessment can help you then say, okay, I hired two people. I've lowered my risk from high to medium. How many more people do I need to go to low risk? And is it efficient? Because a lot of times your risk profile is a lot higher than you think it is, and you don't necessarily need 8 people right away or for the whole year. You might actually only need 4 people. I think a lot of people, especially producers and even people like me, I get caught up in this. Is like, oh, the match can have 40 people in it. You need at least 40 testers, and that's just not true, right? It's just a fundamental flaw in how we think. So I would make sure that you start slow with the QA team and understand why your people are good and how more QA can help you.
Makes sense. Good tips. Thank you very much, Alex. Really well. It's great to. Actually, if I'm reading your back wall, I got to think there's a fourth one. Embrace chaos. We'll save that also maybe for a whole nother discussion at a later date. But look,
Sounds
thank you very
good.
much. It would be great to see you again. I really appreciate you making the
Yeah.
time and sharing your thoughts on the state of games QA. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. This was it was good. I'm looking forward to seeing you in Montreal again.
Look forward to as well. Good to see you.